Vishnu Bhaiya, should we start?
Yes, please start.
Please start.
Okay. Good evening, friends. VIP Road Chartered Accountants Association welcomes all of you. Now, our President CA Vishnu Kumar Tulsian will give the opening remarks. Hand over to Vishnu Kumar Tulsian.
Hello, friends. I welcome all of you on this June meeting. And the topic selected today is very, very relevant, and especially its importance comes more when we are facing the corona. Estate planning is what and how manage our estate, our property when I am alive and why after my departure from this material earth. So its plan is very important. A person who was hard whole life and earn something. They don't want that after or near to their last stage of journey, it gets just restricted to different places. So they want to save for their family, for their relatives, for their near dears. So for that, we are here with two learned speakers, Mr. Saurabh Bhagat and Swaika, my good friend. And Mr. Devanjan Mandal will join shortly because he got some important call from the health ministry. So he will be there. And after 7:30, he might join to address us. Friends, being a president, it is my utmost duty to say something about my VIP association. Friends, this is the association of 800 chartered accountants. The members are only chartered accountants, no other profession. First. Second, we have the dedicated library for the study of chartered accountant, company secretary, post accountants, and the MBA students. Full-fledged library we have. And recently we have developed one policy to support the young chartered accountants by way of beneficial policy, and we have changed our memorandum and article association for this purpose. We have also developed one Eklavya Award theory for the members and for their relatives. And apart from that, we are bringing the mobile app very soon. Then we are also getting our directory printed with so that will increase our knowledge bank of our association itself, that how many people are doing what. So we will, of course, will come with a very good knowledge bank very soon. Apart from that, a lot of development we have done. We have around served around 13,500 people in this year, and we have organized around 100 programs in this year. So our organization is very young, very vibrant, and very active. Our committee is working so hard, and all young people are doing new things every day. With a small remarks, now without wasting our time, we have to hear our learned speakers. So I'm handing over my proceedings to our chairman, Vikas Batwal, to take it ahead. Thank you so much. And I welcome all of you once again.
Thank you, Vishnu. First of all, I want to read the brief profile of the today's speaker. First, I will read out the brief profile of Mr. Shruti Swaika. Yeah, Shruti is a principal associate at Fox and Mandal, a premier multidisciplinary law firm in Kolkata. She started her practice in 2010 after getting enrolled with the Bar Council of West Bengal. Her practice area include corporate and commercial law, dispute resolution, and private client practice. Shruti has appeared in various courts in India, including the District Court, Company Law Tribunal, and the High Court at Calcutta and Delhi, and the Supreme Court of India. And she has gained rich litigation experience. Some of the cases she has appeared in have laid down the law in the field, which are still good today. Shruti did her law at Symbiosis Law College, Pune, graduation with distinction, and before that, completed her schooling from Loreto House, Kolkata. She is enrolled with the West Bengal Bar Council and is member of the Incorporated Law Society of the High Court at Calcutta. She is also a member of ICC National Expert Committee of Corporate and Legal Affairs. She is also a member of Young Indians, the youth wing of Federation of India Industries, and Young FICCI Ladies Organization, a wing of Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Shruti is also an independent director in a joint venture company being consortium of the leading real estate companies in Eastern India and one of the Eastern India's largest food processing companies. In her free time, she likes to paint and she is also a certified graphologist and dabbles in handwriting analysis. We heartily welcome you, ma'am, in our VIP forum. Thank you.
Thank
Our
you very
second,
much.
yeah, our second speaker is Ramesh Kumar Patodia. He is also the speaker. Ramesh Kumar Patodia is a well-known speaker and was born in 1964 and he is graduated from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata in the year 1985 and is a qualified chartered accountant in the year 1986. Immediately after qualifying, he began practicing as a chartered accountant. He was enrolled as a fellow member of ICAI in the year 1991. He has been in continuous practice as chartered accountant in Kolkata for the last 34 years and has been practicing mainly in consultancy, in litigation, and in the field of direct and indirect tax, FEMA, etc. He advises several multinational corporations and has traveled extensively in India and abroad in connection with his professional practice. He is a regular speaker at several professional organizations and is regular contributor to various publications by way of article on professional topics. He has also written several books on professional topics. Incentive for power, telecom, and infrastructure sector, commentary on his HUF, complete guide to reassessment under Section 148 of Income Tax, etc. The Direct Tax Vivad Se Vishwas Act 2020. He is also a trustee of Sri Rani Ji Sati Mandir Jhunjhunu and Gayatri Foundation Kolkata and joint secretary of Baba Kali Kamliwali Panchayat Kshetra and also actively participated in several social welfare activities for helping the underprivileged section of the society. We heartily welcome you, sir, in our today's seminar study circle program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now I request hello. Now I request Madam Smriti Madam to start his deliberation.
Vikasji,
Yes.
before certain change in the last moment, Saurabh Bhagatji will speak first, then
Okay.
Smriti will speak. On taxation point, Ramesh Patodia will speaking. And I say about the Saurabh Bhagatji is a partner of the Fox and Mandal, very learned speaker in the criminal laws, and nowadays he's looking after a lot of litigations and other matters which are related to the civil and criminals. So with due respect and with respect to everyone, I request Saurabh Bhagat to start first. Smriti will take the session. Welcome, Saurabh.
Sir, hello.
Thank you, Mr. Tushan. Good evening,
Sir,
everybody.
I interrupting in the between. Before starting, sir, I want to also read out your profile. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Mr. Saurabh Bhagat. Yeah, Mr. Saurabh Bhagat is a partner of the firm. Mr. Saurabh Bhagat is a partner of the firm and has a rich criminal law practice, having started his career with Justice Joymala Bakshi. He is currently advises in the diverse spectrum of practice areas, including civil litigation, general corporate and commercial practice, real estate, banking, and other government infrastructure. Mr. Saurabh is also the alumni of NUJS Kolkata. Thank you, sir. We heartily welcomes you on the VIPCA platform and today's study circle program. Thank you, sir. Now, sir, you can start your deliberation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening to everybody. As already told by the President and the Chairman, that I am a partner at Fox and Mandal. So this is a law firm which is basically has a rich history. It has started in 1896, and it is one of the oldest and the most respected full-service law firm, not only in Kolkata but also in West Bengal. In the background, I just now come to today's discussion. Today's discussion is on estate planning, what to do. So I will give a brief introduction to the topic. there are various methods by which we can do the estate planning. The most prevalent methods are will and the trust. She will also explain what is will, what is the trust, and how to form it, how to draft it, and what are the basic legal requirement to have such structure of will or trust. Estate planning can be done by any individual. Though as a law firm, we generally do estate planning for high net worth individuals, mainly the promoters and directors of various companies or partnership firm, or in some cases, proprietorship concern. We have been assisting the families in planning succession of their financial assets, immovable assets, jewelry, and all other investment that make during their lifetime. The assets of an individual is acquired by them throughout their life, and it includes not only the immovable assets, but also the movable assets, including the shares, sometimes jewelries, sometimes investment in various mutual fund, as well as fixed deposit. An individual have in their mind various purpose and object to have the estate planning. Some want them to, some want their assets to remain within the families to the next generation and subject to the applicable law to few generations. Some wants the assets that they have earned to protect the assets from any future litigation or any future claim, which is dependent upon various trouble that they may face in their business community. Some wants to provide a clear line of succession in case
Hello, sorry, I had patchy network. Sorry. Good evening. Thank you, Tulshanji, for inviting me here. Thank you, Mr. Batwal, for a very kind introduction. My senior and the partner, Mr. Bhagat, has already very broadly introduced the topic. I will dwell into the finer points and the intricacies as to why estate planning. Let's first start with why we do estate planning, and then we move on to how it can be done. Why, as Mr. Bhagat explained, there are three primary reasons why we do estate planning. One is in the very pure sense, when we do succession planning, like what he explained, when we want to decide within our family how the wealth of the family or the individual is to pass on to the next generations. It is what we also call intergenerational wealth transfer. The second is estate planning for tax efficiencies, which I'm sitting in the midst of very learned people of tax planning. Third is which is in vogue nowadays, create trust and protection. The first reason, there's an echo over here. I can't understand why. 1 second. Okay, I'll just continue. The first reason why we have as estate planning and succession planning is because what we see is a very unique concept to India is we have mostly family managed businesses. Even the biggest businesses, which are the Adanis and Ambanis, are primarily family run businesses. Even in Calcutta, which is one of the oldest commercial hubs of India, it was the capital city earlier, we will see that most as we must be working, or most of our clients, we'll see third generation businesses are very normal in Calcutta. What has happened with these businesses? They've been having very organic growth as opposed to a very planned growth. And with each successive generation coming in, there are obviously many more minds applying themselves at the helm of affairs. There are bound to be disputes. There are bound to be various ways of thinking how to run a business. And estate planning comes in important over here so that you can delineate which assets go to which individuals of the family, or maybe a branch of the family. And this in turn leads to better growth for the businesses, lesser value erosion because of avoiding partitions. And this is one of the very big reasons we see a lot of our clients going. One of the seconds, estate planning from the point of tax. Now, tax, besides the taxes that we already know of and we are practicing, what India used to have earlier was something called inheritance tax or estate duty. Estate duty was applicable on the estate of somebody who passes away, and it was a flat tax which would basically go to the government. At its highest, tax was at 85% in the Indira Gandhi's tenure, and obviously being a very unpopular tax, in Rajiv Gandhi's tenure in 1985, the tax was abolished. Since then, we've only seen a very checkered history of the power at the center. There have been coalition governments. It is being an unpopular tax. No government has had, no party has had the gumption to introduce this tax again. In obviously, it's not something which is popular. But we have seen in the last, since 2014, we have seen a very strong central government. We have seen the party in power come in with overwhelming majority, take unpopular measures. We saw demonetization in 2016. And despite that, they came in with an overwhelming majority in 2019. Given this situation, there has been a lot of conversation about reintroduction of this, because this is a government. Of course, in what manner it can come in, what are the tax will be applicable on, is not something we can obviously say for any certainty. We only hope that it does not come in at the rate at which Madam Indira Gandhi had. The third reason is, like Mr. Naveen Gopalika is saying, the voice is disturbed. Even I understand it's disturbed, but I can't understand. Anyway. The third reason is, again, with the point of view of asset protection. We are looking at our clients are all business houses and also high net worth individuals. One needs to keep the businesses separate from an individual. Business risks should be maintained at business risks and should not become personal losses. So keeping in mind these three main things is why we clients come to us for estate planning. Now, coming to how should we go about advising a client on what to do when it comes to planning their estate, there are 4 or 5 main methods. Some of them are more popular, some of them are less popular only because we don't necessarily see the requirement for those as often. The simplest manner of estate planning is to make a will. It is the easiest document to make. It is easy to change. It does not require registration. A will is governed in India under the Indian Succession Act. It is not under the Hindu Succession Act. And what is important to understand in a will is it is your assets that you can will. Very often we see people confusing the assets of a company of which they are the shareholders as their own personal assets. This cannot be done. It has no meaning. And it's only your own assets which are appearing in your balance sheet, which you can will. To make a will, you need certain fundamental principles. There is a testator, the person who is making the will. There is an executor who will carry out the provisions of the will upon the death of the testator. And you need 2 witnesses. Now, there are a class of wills called privileged wills, but they are the rarity. They're not meant for our clients. It's for people in active combat or armed. It's not something we can do. So now, what is it required to make a will? a testator needs to know what his assets are as on a particular date, and he needs to have clarity of intent as to how he plans to distribute those. He can be distributing them as asset classes. He can have very specific instructions as to what asset needs to go to some person. He can have a generic decision as to all my assets should go to X person, in which case he doesn't need to describe each asset. But one way or the other, he needs to have certainty as to what he wants to do with it. Thereafter, he can very simply write it, type it. You may take the assistance of a lawyer. You do not need to take the assistance of a lawyer. You need only to decide an executor who will carry out the will and 2 witnesses who will say that, who will sign at the will and say that you were of sound mind. And you had what we call testamentary capacity, that you were of sound mind. It is important to know that a witness does not need to know the contents of the will also. He is simply witnessing that it was signed by the testator and that they were present in front of each other. Other points in a will that are relevant are you do not need stamp paper, you do not need any formatting, you do not need all these what we call engrossed paper, court paper, nothing. You do not need to register a will. It is just as valid without being registered. If you wrote it in a piece of paper, A4 piece of paper from a notebook, it would be just as valid. It can be easily changed because it is the last will that has value. So even if you keep changing a will, it does not matter. It is stamp duty efficient in the sense that there is no, the will comes into effect and a transfer takes place only upon the death of the testator. Now, while, as opposed to many of the other structures which we will see later, where stamp duties could be applicable at the current stage. Wills may or may not be tax efficient from an angle of estate duty because we do not know in what form estate duty comes in, if at all. They may or may not tax transfers through wills. It's useful because it provides it helps in estate planning because it provides clarity as to what the succession is, who, where an asset goes. So there is, in that sense, clarity. It is important to know that in some jurisdictions, a will requires to be probated. There is a cost and time and effort implication on that. In Calcutta, one can typically expect to obtain a probate of a will within 8 to 9 months. That is the job of the executor. And thereafter, it is the job of the executor to distribute the assets in terms of the will. The other option which people go for estate planning is to create trusts. Now, the reason people go to create trusts is because it is a much more defined structure. It is a much more, from the point of view of estate duty or other asset protection, it is a safer mechanism than a will in the sense that transfer takes place on the current date. And that provides a lot more safety. Now, what are the important features of a trust that one needs to know? It is, from the point of view of estate planning, it is primarily private trusts as opposed to public trusts which are created. A lot of people have this notion that trusts are creations in perpetuity. This is not the situation. These trusts that we are talking about are all private trusts, and what we call family trusts, what we call asset protection trusts, they're all private trusts. These trusts are governed under the Indian Trusts Act, and it is very important that these trusts have a limited time period within which they need to end. We often see people, our clients, coming up with this question that the Tata trusts are, they've been there in perpetuity, and why can't we make trusts like the Tata trusts? It is, it's for everybody to know here, the Tata trusts are charitable trusts, they're not private trusts. Even though Mr. Ratan Tata is on the board and he is the chairperson and hence he can retain control of the companies, but they're all charitable trusts. And the key ingredients in a trust, the key people involved in the trust are the settlor, the trustees, and the beneficiaries. The settlor is the person who creates the trust. He or she creates the initial transfer of the trust. A trust is created for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So all the assets that are transferred to a trust are done so for the benefit of the beneficiaries, and the trustees are the persons who are in control of the assets of the trust, and in very literal term, the people who are entrusted with taking care of the assets of the trust for the benefit of the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are not party to a trust deed, and it is only the settlor and the trustees who are party to the trust deed. Beneficiaries need not necessarily be named beneficiaries, although it is ideal to have named beneficiaries. You can also have a certain class of people who are beneficiaries, who are defined as a class in the sense that all the children of Mr. X will be beneficiaries of the trust, or children and grandchildren of Mr. X shall be the beneficiaries of the trust. So you can have a class of people, but it is important to note that you cannot, although you can include unborn persons in this class also, they will be limited to the timeline of the first unborn person attaining 18 years of age. This is what we call the rule against perpetuities. It is basically the intent of the legislation. It's an international rule really, and the intent across the world is that asset is meant to be fluid. It is not supposed to be controlled by the grave. Now, trusts, it is important to understand where the ownership of properties which are transferred to a trust, where does that lie? Although the beneficial ownership of the property lies with the beneficiaries, the legal ownership of the properties lies with the trustees. So it is the trustees who can act on those properties, and although they are limited by the powers given by the trustee, subject to those powers, they can act in any manner. So if there are shares, they can vote on those shares. If there is property, they can buy, sell, mortgage, lease the property. All rights are provided, whatever is limited in the trust deed. It is important in a sense now to discuss the comparison between a will and a trust. Why should one go for a will versus why should one go for a trust? Over here, like we discussed, a will can be easily modified. You can just create a new will, or you can have a codicil. It does not require too much of formality. It does not require time or any cost or effort really. This is not true for a trust. A trust is created by a registered document. To modify a trust does require you to make another registered document. There are a lot of laws in place for modification of a trust deed. So it's not as simple. Again, for a will, the person whose assets it is, the person does not lose control of the assets until he is dead. It is only upon his death that a will comes into effect. So till his dying breath, he is the owner of the properties. In case of a trust, that is not true. The trust, the moment the transfer is made to the trust, the legal ownership vests with the trustees. Although the person who is transferring could himself be one of the trustees, to some extent, he has lost control over his assets because he is now acting in the capacity of a trustee. Now, this is something people are not always comfortable with, because with personal family dynamics, people do want to retain control. It's important, while understanding a will at the current stage does not create any structure. There is no compliance involved in a will, whereas a trust requires several compliances which are involved, in the sense that you do have to create a PAN, bank accounts, you have to have annual filings, you do have to have minutes of books, meetings, trustees should have their minutes of meetings, you do have to maintain accounts. So all those compliances come in with a trust, whereas a will requires really nothing. Once you've written it, you can simply forget about it. But to have a trust from the point of estate planning specifically, one should keep in mind also two other features, which are whether it is a revocable or an irrevocable trust, and whether it is a determinate versus indeterminate trust. A revocable trust has different tax implications as opposed to an irrevocable trust. I will leave this to be dealt with Mr. Patodia, who will obviously have a lot more experience in this field. But to make it efficient trust from estate planner point of view, it should be irrevocable and it should be indeterminate. The reason, the difference between a determinate and indeterminate trust is, in a determinate trust, the trust deed itself lays down the shared percentage or the beneficial ratio to which each beneficiary is entitled. So if there are 5 beneficiaries, it can lay down that each will have an equal 20% interest in the assets of the trust, or in whichever manner. It can lay down 10, 10, 10, 40, 10, or it could lay down any manner, but it would be determinate. It is not at the discretion of the trustees to decide how to distribute the assets. An indeterminate trust is the exact opposite, where it is up to the trustees to decide how they will distribute the assets of the trust. This is useful because in an indeterminate trust, one can, since there is no identification of what assets can come to you, it is unpredictable. It cannot therefore be attached in any legal proceeding either, because there is no guarantee as to what part of the trust asset actually belongs to you. In a sense, all of it belongs to you, and yet none of it belongs to you. That's why it helps in protecting the asset from various other laws. These are the two main vehicles through which people do estate planning, the wills and trusts. There are certain other vehicles and agreements that people do enter into or create. These are less popular, but it is gaining traction. One is, we have seen several of our clients and bigger families create something called a family charter. It is very important to know that family charters are not binding agreements. They do have persuasive value, and we see families entering into family charters more from the point of view of penning down what was the intent of the forefathers, of the elders of the family. This has a value in where a person wants to honor the wishes of their elders. It does help putting in writing, just for clarity of memory, because memory fades. It is, people do it, and it is in all cases followed on good faith. People do make certain parts of a family charter as a binding agreement. It is basically in the sense of an agreement inter se between parties, and that little part of it can be made binding, but it won't be binding on people who are not signatories to it, and not to a certain class of people altogether. But it is something we are seeing happening. Besides these major methods, some other methods which we see, and these are more prevalent for smaller businesses, not for big family businesses. We see partnership firms, LLPs, and even private limited companies as estate planning methods. I will explain how. Very often we see small businesses are being run in proprietorship models. This is a very risky form of business. All of you would be aware that as soon as the sole proprietor is no longer there, the business in a sense collapses. There is no business left to per se. There is no brand that one can really have left. So we are seeing small businesses convert themselves into partnerships to provide for continuity of a business. This is, of course, a good way of planning your estate if you do want to have continuity of your business. Partnerships obviously have their inherent drawbacks in the sense that there is unlimited liability. Although one registration is optional, one registration for all practical purposes is compulsory, but unlimited liability is a major drawback. So to curb that, we've seen the rise of LLPs. LLPs are similar in partnerships, but with the key difference that liability in an LLP is limited. Now, what the tax considerations would be in a partnership versus LLP, again, I would best leave to Mr. Patodia. But one does understand that in an LLP, sometimes it is easier to provide for your personal wealth, or tax implications in an LLP, I understand, are easier than that in a partnership. Then again, there are private limited companies also, which people are creating from the point of view of creating continuity of business, which would otherwise be missing in a sole proprietorship. Again, you have limited liability if you create a private limited company. And again, it's from the point of view of creating taking a small company, a small business into a big business. People create private limited companies because when we see that the business has potential, good scope of growth, we also obviously want to see whether we can eventually take it from a sole proprietorship to getting it listed, getting equity. That's the vision of entrepreneurs when they are creating businesses. So we see that as a manner of estate planning too, where they look at continuity in that manner. These are the broad ways in how people are looking at estate planning. I've seen that there are several questions that have come up on the chat box. I have not read any of them yet. I will just go through them and take them one at a time. What happens in a situation where the executor dies prior to the death of the testator and the testator hasn't appointed another executor before his death? So one is, very often we find in wills, when we are drafting wills, we do provide for an alternative executor. We always advise the person signing, making a will, that you should have an executor who is much younger to you. So in the natural events that the executor should outlive the testator. Obviously, we are living in a pandemic where nothing can be taken for granted. The law does provide for an executor to be, not an executor, but you can get a probate. Somebody else can apply for probate of the for letters of administration of the will. These people can be any of the beneficiaries. Any other person interested under the will can apply for getting letters of administration and administrating the assets of the deceased in terms of the will. Pranab has asked, can an executor be a witness or a beneficiary? Yes, an executor can be a witness. No, a witness should not be a beneficiary. So an executor can be a beneficiary, but a witness should not ideally be a beneficiary. Whether Kolkata High Court is settling probate cases now. Kolkata High Court has had limited functioning. It is functioning though. Probate cases are happening. The probate department is open. Having said that, how fast it is happening, it is the less said, the better. Whether registration of trust deed is compulsory and under which act? We have the Registration Act, for which provides for which documents are compulsory registerable. A trust deed required, although it does not need to compulsory be registered, but for all practical purposes, it is compulsory registerable. It is, you can equate it to like a partnership firm, where a partnership firm doesn't actually technically need to be registered, but that non-registration has serious consequences that you might as well register it. A trust deed can be equated to that same point where, for all practical purposes, a trust deed does need to be registered. Registration of a trust deed comes under the Registration Act, but a trust deed, the provisions of the trust deed itself will be governed by the Indian Trust Act 1882. If a person has died, whether his/her assets can be transferred to legal heirs without registering the will in the court of law. You are not registering the will in a court of law. What happens is, and this is state specific, and presidency courts have developed their own manner. For example, the process in Delhi is different from Bombay, which is different from Calcutta. In Calcutta, you do need to submit the original will in court. Once it is submitted in court, you will not get back the original will. What we get back is a probate, which is a handwritten copy of the will from the court, which is authenticated to be as a valid document. That is as good as the will. But it is never the original will. And can you transfer the assets without applying for the probate? In West Bengal, no. In fact, in most other jurisdictions, no. Even Delhi has its own method, which is a different method of getting a probate, but they do have a method. Can a relative be a witness in a will? Yes, anybody can be a witness in a will. If a will has been prepared and duly registered, but later the person changes his will and does not get it registered, is the changed will valid in the, yes, the changed will is valid in the circumstances. However, it should be it is easier to dispute such a will. So it is important that you are the proof is impeccable. The witnesses should be there. It's ideal that you can legitimately prove the second will. But yes, it is the second will that is the valid will. I think these are all the questions that have come. If there is anything further, I'm happy to answer questions. Otherwise, I think I have summarized how estate planning is done.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Bhatwal.
Ma'am, as I understand with your speech, that will is not required to be registered, right? And even if there is a registered will and there after that there is certain will which is not registered, even the latest will executed will be effective.
Not even effective, it is the valid will. Yes.
Audience, if you have any questions, you may please ask the learned speaker. Our second speaker is ready to.
I think
make
I've
us more
been exhaustive enough in my speech that there has been no further question. But all of these, as one would understand, every action taken by any business house, any entrepreneur is strongly understood on the tax angle, which Mr. Patodia will be able to elucidate on now.
Yeah. One more question came just right now, Sweety. One is that can the changes will be challenged in the court of law? Amit Sharma.
Any will can be challenged in a court of law. The changed will can also be challenged in a court of law. Even the original will can be challenged in a court of law. I hope that answers your question, Amit.
It was really nicely deliberated. And I request the chairman to take the proceedings. Because
Thank you, Vishnu. Now I request our Joint Secretary, Vivek Bankaji, to offer a vote of thanks to Madam.
Okay, thanks, Vikas. But I am not Joint Secretary, so I am a Secretary, Vivek Banka. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
General Secretary. Yes, you are General Secretary.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, thanks, Vikas. On behalf of BIPCA, I would like to thank Shruti Swaika ji for sharing views on estate planning, what to do. Ma'am, you explained the topic in a very nice and lucid manner. Really, the deliberation was wonderful and very informative. And I am sure it will give the value addition to our professional knowledge. Thanks a lot, ma'am. Now over to Vikas, please.
I would
thank you,
request
Vivek ji.
Saika ji to please remain with us till the conclusion of this session, because we have to hear a lot of things from the Patodia ji and we have to learn a lot of experiences of his professional career.
No, absolutely. It's a pleasure for me to be able to learn from him.
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for staying with us. Now I request our Ramesh Patodia ji to start his deliberation.
Thank you, all the members of VIP Road Chartered Accountants Association, my very good friend, President Vishnuji Tulsian, the Secretary and Convener of the association, and everybody present over here, including my co-speakers, Shruti Swaika and Mr. Saurabh, I think. Shruti presented the gist of estate planning very beautifully. Friends, I will be dealing with the taxation aspect of estate planning. Before that, I would briefly touch upon some of the important things which are growing in my mind, which are related to estate planning, and which I find to be relevant in this COVID period, because I have myself seen the kind of insincerity that everybody has towards estate planning. And friends, when I am telling you this, please note that what I am preaching, I am not practicing. Because I have also not prepared my will, nor I have done my trust. Though in my case, friends, let me tell you, since I have a limited family, my wife and son, so I am pretty sure that whatever assets I will leave, my wife and son will inherit. So that kind of assurance is there. But friends, let me tell you about those families where there are larger in numbers. The concept of estate planning must be given its due importance. And particularly, friends, I want to warn that in order to take care of girl child, it is very important that we do proper estate planning for the girl child also once she is married. Because nowadays, after marriage, post-marriage litigations, post-marriage divorce, we can see day in and out that our family girls, after getting married, if for God forbidding, they have to come back to their parents' house, they are in a very big trouble, friends. Because of the absence of proper estate planning, though Hindu Succession Act was amended in the year 2005, where daughters were made co-partners, but that has not lived up to its expectation. Because now the law says that daughters are co-partners in their father's family, not in their husband's family. So if your daughter is getting married, she has got no right over the assets of her husband. The law says that you have to go to your father to take the rights in the family assets. That is a very larger thing, friends, which requires a lot more discussion, I think, but I will not go to all those things. Let me come back to the taxation issue, friends. As Shruti said, that there are two important aspects as far as estate planning is concerned. One is, of course, will, and second is the medium of trust, which is generally followed throughout the world. And as far as trust is concerned, it is the discretionary trust is the most popular mode, which is being followed throughout the world, friends. India, I will say, we are living in India and we are fortunate as compared to other parts of the world, like USA and the United Kingdom, where inheritance tax is there. And a lot of people do estate planning. In fact, you can see Google that the divorce between Bill Gates and Melinda Gates is the reason for divorce is estate planning only. It is not an actual divorce, but it is a estate planning. You can see in Google. I'm not sure what it is, but the theories are floating around. So as far as India is concerned, friends, as Shruti rightly said, estate duty was abolished long ago. So as a tool of tax planning, the estate planning is generally not being taken in that perspective. One does not do estate planning for the purpose of doing tax planning, because there are not many taxes associated with the planning of the estate. That is the reason, because had there been a estate duty, had there been an inheritance tax like other countries, then you would have seen that the estate planning would have gathered momentum. One of the reasons could be that this is not getting momentum is because the taxes are not much upon the inheritance. When you inherit the estate of your father, you are not paying any tax for the inheritance. So that is why you are sleeping that what जल्दी क्या है, मिलना तो मेरे को ही है ना यार, कोई इनकम टैक्स वाला थोड़ी आके ले जाने वाला है. So that can be one of the, but state planning, that is why it is not being done. I would rather think so. So though to a limited extent, by creating trust, one can, by creating discretionary trust rather, because if you create a specific trust, then you do not, in a sense, create another taxable unit. But if you create a discretionary trust, you create another taxable unit in your fold, where you get another entity for which you are able to file tax returns, where you can take the tax benefits which are generally available to an individual. So to that extent, one can see that there is a tax planning. Let me explain here itself this particular aspect, that when you are creating a discretionary trust, friends, the discretionary trust is assessed as a separate unit, all of us know. However, there is a lot more confusion. Even Central Board of Direct Taxes has acknowledged that the status in which a discretionary trust will be assessed, generally we are forced to write the status of discretionary trust as AOP trust while filing the income tax return, because you do not have any option of selecting the status in which the discretionary trust will be assessed. That is why all of us are forced to file the return of a discretionary trust in a wrong status. Because if you see the jurisprudence, there are decisions of Calcutta High Court in Krishna Bandar. I think it is 36 ITR, I think, if I am correct. Then there was a decision of Delhi High Court also in the case of Food Corporation of India, where this issue is settled issue, that the status of a trust would be determined by the status of the beneficiaries. So therefore, suppose if the trust has 100 individuals as beneficiaries, say in the case of Food Corporation of India, what happened? Food Corporation started a trust for the benefit of its employees, who were all individuals, and that employees beneficiary trust was filing its return of income. And while doing so, the assessing officer sent a notice to this trust that you are liable to deduct tax at source in respect of interest which you paid. And in that context, the matter went up to Honorable Delhi High Court. And Delhi High Court said that the status of the trust is individual. It doesn't matter whether the beneficiary is one individual or 100 individual. Insofar as the beneficiaries are individual, the status would always remain individual. And therefore, this trust being individual, the provisions of Section 194A dealing with deduction of tax at source are not applicable to individuals. And therefore, this trust is not liable to deduct tax at source. So friends, please note that the discretionary trust status would be determined on the basis of the beneficiaries of the trust. I am repeating, if the beneficiary of a discretionary trust is a company, then the status of trust would become company. It would be taxable in the capacity of a company. If the beneficiary of a trust is HUF, then the status of the trust would be HUF. This is the way the status of a discretionary trust is determined. The law is very clear, friends, but the software of the Income Tax Department has not been made in this manner, and we are all forced to file wrong return in wrong status. In fact, for the assessment year 2012-13, you can see Google, there is a circular of CBDT where CBDT has acknowledged this mistake and had allowed the return of income to be filed manually for that particular year, though there is no such circular for subsequent years. But the position of law is clear as far as the status is concerned. And so once the status of the trust is determined as an individual, then it will become entitled to all the benefits that are eligible to be taken by an individual, like 80C, 80D. Whatever benefits you get in the case of an individual, you will be entitled to take the same benefits insofar as this discretionary trust is concerned. This is one very important point, friends, where a lot of people are in dark. Now, friends, coming back to the concept of will, friends. When you receive something on account of will, then as all of us know, Section 56 of the Income Tax Act is not applicable. So will is the only route where you can say make a gift to a person who is not related to you now. It is, but that will take effect only upon the death of the testator. The will does not take into effect until the testator dies. During his lifetime, the assets cannot be transferred except I will say, except when a trust is created by will. It is very well possible, friends, that you create a trust by will and you transfer, say, some immovable property in pursuance of that will, in pursuance of the trust which you have created by this will, where you say that I am transferring this particular immovable property to this trust in pursuance of the will which I have made now. And the trust would be irrevocable trust. That is very well possible, friends, where the assets are transferred to the trust through the will during the lifetime of the testator. And unless the testator reserves the right to get back the property, that cannot be undone. Otherwise, as Shruti rightly said, you can write as many will as you want. The law does not make any restriction on changing the will. You can write as many wills, you can write any number of wills in respect of any number of properties you have. The law is perfectly, law perfectly allows you. Indian Succession Act 1925 can be read for more literature on this, friends. And any for the sake of repetition, anything you receive in pursuance of the will will not be taxable in the hands of the recipient, whether he is a relative or non-relative, whosoever he may be. That is not taxable. That kind of thing is, that particular taxation aspect is very clear. Connected with this is, friends, there is a concept of gift in contemplation of death. Marj ul maut in the Mohammedan language. It is allowed in even in the personal law of Hindus and Muslims, marj ul maut. So when a person is giving a gift when he is on the deathbed, which is gift in contemplation of death, that is also valid, and that is also outside the purview of Section 56 of the Income Tax Act. Lot of people I have seen in these COVID times, where there were little chance of recovery of the person who was in hospital. People have done these gifts in contemplation of death to avoid Section 56. I know some of them, friends. So, as far as receiving something out of the will in this manner, it is perfectly all right. Now, coming to the trust, friends. When you are creating a trust, the trust, as already Shruti has said, indeterminate trust or determinate trust, basically a discretionary trust or a specific trust. I would touch upon here briefly. A specific trust is a trust where the share of the beneficiaries are fixed. So suppose if a family, suppose I have got two sons, I create a trust for the benefit of both my sons, and I keep the beneficiaries ratio at say 50% each. So there are two beneficiaries. The share of beneficiary is fixed at 50% each. So this is a case of a specific trust, friends, which I am creating, where each beneficiary knows that he is like a 50% partner. He has got right over 50% of the assets of the trust. However, this kind of trust is avoided generally because of its inherent disadvantages. From the point of view of the aspect of protection of the wealth, friends, because God forbidding, if something happens to the person who is the beneficiary, if he is in a financial trouble, and if he is a beneficiary of a specific trust, then to the extent of his interest in the specific trust, his assets are liable to be parted with in case he has any liability, friends. And that is why the specific trust route is normally we do not advise. We advise generally the discretionary trust route, friends, where coming back to the earlier example, my two sons are there. Both are beneficiaries of the trust. However, I do not define what is their share. I keep the right of distribution with the trustees. It is the trustees who will make the decision that which beneficiaries should get how much. They can even give entire thing to one of the beneficiaries. They can even give two in equal portion, unequal portion, in any manner they like. The discretion is given to the trustees of the trust, friends. And that is why it is also popularly known as a discretionary trust. So the advantage of a discretionary trust would as a corollary be that since the beneficiary's right over the interest in the trust is not fixed, he cannot say that I own so much of benefit from the trust that is not capable of being attached in case there is any liability, friends. Now, as far as taxation aspect of these two type of trust is concerned, that is also different. In case of a specific trust, friends, since the benefit of the specific beneficiary is known, it is taxed in the hands of the beneficiary to the extent of his share in the trust. Here, friends, Section 166 of the Income Tax Act gives power to the assessing officer to tax the trust or the beneficiary, whichever is more beneficial to him. So if he finds that it is more beneficial that he should tax each of the beneficiary in respect of their share, then he will adopt that route. But if he finds that it is better to tax the trust, then he will make the tax in the hands of the trust. And after the taxation is done, the beneficiary will get the net of tax, whatever is there, in the ratio which is already defined, friends. That power is given to the assessing officer. He can do the tax planning for the government of India, in a sense. However, friends, he doesn't have the similar luxury in the case of a discretionary trust. Because in a discretionary trust, he would not know that which beneficiary's share is how much, unless the share is actually given to him, to the beneficiary. So how would he adapt such a situation, such a planning in the case of a discretionary trust? He would not be able to do. So therefore, friends, in a discretionary trust, it is the discretionary trust which is liable to pay tax, not the beneficiary. However, let me tell you one very interesting point here, friends. There's a very interesting decision of Supreme Court as reported in 211 ITR in the case of Kamalini Khatau, which was argued by the legendary Mr. Harish Salve, though Mr. Salve lost that case. But that is not the point, friends. In Kamalini Khatau's case, friends, which was a case of a discretionary trust, the Supreme Court laid down the law that even in the case of a discretionary trust, if the year in which the income is earned, suppose the discretionary trust has earned 1 crore rupees in the year ended 31st March 2021. And this discretionary trust has 2 beneficiaries whose shares are not fixed. And this 1 crore of rupee is not distributed in this year. Then the situation is clear that the income of rupees 1 crore is liable to be taxed in the hands of the discretionary trust. It will have to pay the tax on that 1 crore. However, friends, let us take an example where the discretionary trust which has earned an income of rupees 1 crore in the year ended 31st March 21 distributes this amount of rupees 1 crore in this very year to the beneficiaries, say equally 50 lakhs. In that case, friends, since the amount has already been distributed to the beneficiaries in the year in which the income has been earned, the assessing officer now gets clothed with the power to tax the beneficiaries in the year in this year itself, instead of taxing the trust. You get my point, I think. That is what Supreme Court said in Kamalini Khatau 211 ITR, friends. That if in a case of a discretionary trust, the benefit is distributed in the year in which the income is earned, then the amount can be taxed in the hands of the beneficiaries, not otherwise. So coming back to the original example, friends, if the amount of 1 crore on which discretionary trust has paid tax in the year 31st March 2021, if it is distributed to the beneficiaries subsequently in the next year, then in the hands of the beneficiaries, it will be a capital receipt. It will not be a taxable receipt in the hands of the beneficiary in the subsequent years, because it has already suffered taxation in the hands of the discretionary trust. I hope I am clear on this point. Here, friends, let me tell you one more thing. When we are doing the planning of discretionary trust, you should note a thumb rule that if a discretionary trust is created, then if this trust has got business income, then it will be charged to tax. The income of the discretionary trust would be charged to tax at a maximum marginal rate. So suppose the maximum marginal rate is 33%, then whatever income of the trust is there, it would be charged to tax at 33% without any kind of exemption. Though there is one litigation on this point, I have found one decision of I don't remember exactly where, in the context of wealth tax, friends, the court allowed basic exemption limit to be taken even in respect of a discretionary trust where the wealth tax was levied at a maximum marginal rate, friends. So if you have a business income, then be prepared to pay the MMR rate, friends. Though, in case some of the incomes are liable to be taxed at a special rate, say the income from capital gains which has suffered the STT, then that would bear the tax at the rate of 10% or 15% as the case may be, and not the tax at MMR. That is there. Otherwise, generally, one should avoid having business income or doing business in the case of the discretionary trust, barring where the trust is created by will and the trust is created for the persons who are dependent on the person who is creating the trust. In that case, the trust can have the luxury of having business income, otherwise not, friends. Other than this, friends, generally the income of a discretionary trust is chargeable at the MMR rate, even otherwise also. However, not in few cases where the trust is created by a will, where the beneficiary is the only beneficiary in that particular trust. These are all given in section 160 of the Income Tax Act, friends. So whenever we are creating a discretionary trust, we are advising our client to take precaution that they do not fall in a MMR rate. Those in some of the high net worth clients case, friends, where their income is in any case under the MMR, they do not mind creating a trust where they have to pay MMR. In that case, they can do business also, since they do not mind paying the tax at the MMR rate. Their main purpose is not tax. Their main purpose is creation of a discretionary trust. So that is as far as creation of a discretionary trust, friends. And when a trust is created, earlier there was a dispute in section 56. Since there was no exemption clause in section 56, that when a trust is receiving something from assets from the settler, then whether it is taxable in the hands of the trust as a income or not. That was later on clarified, friends. And now you find in section 56, there is a clause whereby any money received by a trust from a person for the benefit of relatives of that individual is not taxable under section 56 of the Income Tax Act in the hands of the trust. So therefore, whenever a trust is being created now, you should, at the time of creation, that 56 may not be that much relevant. But whenever you are transferring any money from the person who has created the trust to the trust, you should ensure that section 56 is not applicable, or the beneficiaries of the trust are such which would give the exemption to the trust in case section 56 is applied. That must be taken into account, friends. And now the reverse question arises that when I, as a beneficiary of the trust, I receive something from the trust, what is the position? Will that be treated as income in my hands under section 56, friends? though there is no direct, nothing is written in section 56 as far as this is concerned, but this is too obvious that when I am a beneficiary of a trust and I receive something from that trust on account of being the beneficiary of that trust, in that case, it cannot be said to be without consideration, because the prerequisite for applicability of section 56 is that it should be without consideration, friends. And here I have said in some of my earlier seminars also, there is a very important decision of Supreme Court as reported in 42 ITR. 42 ITR name I am not remembering, but yeah, it's some Bhatia. It's some Bhatia's case, where the Supreme Court, if you want to have good knowledge about the concept of gift and gift without consideration, all those things, this Sonia Bhatia, yeah, 42 ITR Sonia Bhatia's case is very important case. So friends, here when I am receiving something from the trust of which I am a beneficiary, then it is not being received by me without consideration, first of all. And there is another decision of Supreme Court reported in 82 ITR, NS Getty Chettiar's case, where Supreme Court in the context of HUF said that when a person receives something from HUF, then it cannot be said that there is a transfer, because what I am receiving from the HUF is by virtue of my right over that asset which I had. Therefore, when I am receiving something, it is my own thing I am receiving. I am receiving something from myself, and therefore there is no transfer in such a case, 82 ITR. The same reasoning can be applied here also. And therefore, unless it is a totally unrelated kind of a trust, this concept is applicable and you will not be liable to pay any further tax in addition to the tax which has already been suffered in the hands of the trust. Though some kind of planning is being done, friends, in the case of NRI trusts. Let me briefly tell you of that when the trust is a non-resident trust, the beneficiaries are resident, but the trust is non-resident. In that case, the trust would pay the tax as per the taxation rules of the country in which the trust is resident. Whereas the beneficiaries will pay the tax as per the rules of residency as applicable to India. And there has been a tax planning where the trust, neither the trust nor the beneficiaries end up paying tax, because the trust is set up in a tax haven where the trust doesn't pay any tax, and subsequently when the benefit is given to the beneficiaries, it is deemed to be a capital receipt, and therefore they are also not liable to pay tax. On this point, there is a decision of Calcutta Tribunal, which was, I think, argued by on the late the legendary Mr. N.K. Poddar, though the Calcutta Tribunal ruled against Mr. Poddar in that case. On this point, there is a decision of Bombay Tribunal as well in favor of the SSC friends in that case. So this is as far as briefly the manner of taxation of the trust and the beneficiaries. And I have already told you about the taxation as applicable in case the assets are transferred to the medium of a will. That's all, I think, friends, as far as the taxation is concerned. Thank you, friends. Now I can take up any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaiya. And first of all, I would like to say all the audience that this association, Ramesh Bhaiya is the very important pillar of this association, and he's our own member. So you are in my own family. You're not outsider, sir. So you're not a lecturer. You are the member of the family. And sir, one question came. You told your own experience that you, your wife, and one son or daughter, and you hardly think of this. And this is the status of all the maximum of the family in the Indian culture. So suddenly, in the time of Corona or after this epidemic, suddenly a lot of academic flood started to discuss over the will, over the trust, over this. But still, the social culture of India says such type of assurance that they don't even burden about and going for the will and trust like that. So how you think it? How you think it?
You here, my piece of advice would be to all the listeners who are having daughters who may be unmarried or married. I would advise them to be particularly concerned about making provision for their unmarried or married daughters separately. Now, notwithstanding that you may be having only a small family, because friends, I have seen in my professional as well as practical life. In fact, I am handling few cases where the daughters are in deep trouble, friends. They are fighting for their maintenance. They are not able to live a comfortable life because of the marital disputes, friends. So I would recommend all the listeners who are having sweet daughters, their little daughters whom they love very much, to be concerned about their well-being when the father and mother are no longer there. Number one, when they are married, they should definitely make a long-term planning for their daughters by way of a trust, friends. I will advise not by way of a will. Because here, friends, will can be changed. Will can be subject matter of litigation. Mr. R.S. Lodha has gone to the heaven, but the litigation is still continuing in Calcutta High Court. So my advice would be that you should have a trust for those daughters so that they are certain that there be something that you are doing for them to be taken care.
Continuing with the same example, somebody's thought is that as some changes were done recently within a year or 2 years, I don't know, in which the girls were given the power to share the property of their paternal property also, and after marriage they can also share the property of husband. So both are the girls are getting both the benefit at both the places. Then why we should worry about the girls planning?
Let me clarify this point, friends. As far as the right of the girl in the father's property is concerned, after she is married, can you tell me cases where the family has shared the wealth equally with the married daughters?
No.
क्या आप अपने दिल पर हाथ रख के बोल सकते हैं? मैं तो नहीं बोल सकता हूं. On the other hand, I can give you at least 10 decisions of various High Court and Supreme Court where the dispute is going between brother and sisters.
Oh.
Where the appellant is sister and the respondent is brother. So friends, we should not live in a fool's paradise that the daughter is the way the law has been amended in the year 2005. In my opinion, friends, I have written a book on HUF. I have seen practically that it is a farce. Because आपकी लड़की, आप 20-22 साल की जब वो लड़की हो जाती है, आप उसकी शादी करके उसको दूसरे घर में भेज देते हो. वो अपनी लाइफ की 2/3 जो जिंदगी है वो गुजारना है उसको हस्बैंड के साथ, है कि नहीं? अगर उसकी 75 साल की लाइफ है, आप 25 साल के होते होते तो माँ बाप उसको विदा कर देते हैं, 50 साल उसको गुजारना है दूसरे घर में। और जब उसको पैसे की दरकार हो तो गवर्नमेंट ने लॉ अमेंड कर दिया कि आप तुम अपने बाप के पास जाओ पैसा मांगने के लिए। I have given you right in the father's property. Friends, I have seen out of my experience, I am telling, this is generally not done. In spite of all the good intentions of government 2005 में जो amendment हुआ था, यहाँ पे कितनी सारी ladies भी शायद है, इनमें से कितनों को हो सकता है मालूम भी नहीं हो कि ऐसा कोई law है. That is one. Secondly, friends, as far as the personal husband से assets लेने का सवाल है, फ्रेंड्स, हस्बैंड की जो पर्सनल प्रॉपर्टी है ड्यूरिंग हस्बैंड्स लाइफ टाइम, वो अगर किसी जानवर को भी विल करना चाहे तो वो कर सकता है. यू रीड द केस ऑफ RS लोढ़ा वर्सेस KK बिरला. सुप्रीम कोर्ट हैज क्लियरली रिटन that I can even make a will in favor of an animal if I want, if it is my individual property. So how the wife can say anything if husband doesn't want to give anything? कोर्ट के चक्कर आप काटते रहो, फैमिली कोर्ट के चक्कर. वकील का फीस देने के लिए भी पैसा नहीं है. फ्रेंड्स, आई हैव सीन केसेस. लीव अलोन फाइटिंग द केसेस. कहां से वो लड़ेगी? छोटा बच्चा है, छोटे बच्चे को कैसे वो संभालेगी? उसका स्कूल में कैसे इंतजाम होगा? सो फ्रेंड्स, let us talk practically. The daughters are most vulnerable and I think we all must make provision for them. Yes, sir.
Yeah. The third question which is here is how HF vehicle is good with estate planning and to keep the property under the HUF if the family is having husband, wife, son and daughter, all the 4 members.
HUF, if you keep the assets in the HUF, that is also, I think, good, because in the joint Hindu family, the assets, the rights of the daughter are also protected by the 2005 amendment. So to that extent, HUF is also, I would say, is good. However, what I find out of my practical experience is that there is a lot of misconception or lot of lack of awareness of knowledge among the community regarding the manner in which the HUF is to be dealt with. Otherwise, HUF I find to be good. Say, for example, I will tell you one thing regarding an amendment which was made in the year 2005, whereby the government has made a provision in section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act that when a person dies, then his interest in the co-partnership property on the date of his death would be capable of being, would have to be transmitted as per the will or intestate on the date of his death. To explain this, suppose if the HUF has 4 members, one of the member dies, then say his 25% share on the date of his death would become fixed on that date. And that 25% share would be distributed according to his will, or if he has not made any will, then as per section 8 of the Hindu Succession Act among the heirs of that person. That amendment was made in the provisions of section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act. But how many of the people, those who are managing HUF know about this? So suppose if a family member dies, then what happens? Later, the HUF continues and his shares, his portion is not distributed separately in this manner, which is wrong. And therefore, to that extent, I would say that trust is a better route. With a well-defined trust deed is there, that will be more that would be more amenable to positive use rather than HUF, I would say.
Okay. Some of the questions are we received in the chat box. I'm reading one by one. One is Rahul Losalka. He's asking, can one of the adult beneficiary contribute to acquire property by trust as a trustee?
Pardon, I didn't get the question. Can you please ask the question?
He's asking,
can one of the adult beneficiaries contribute to acquire a property by trust as a trustee? Though this question is not very clear, what I suppose is that a person is a trustee as well as a beneficiary. So therefore, there is no issue. A person can be both at the same time and he can make contribution to the trust also. There is no issue in that.
Sir, one question is from Lalit Agarwal ji. He is from Raniganj. Lalit ji, are you in the Zoom meeting right now? Lalit ji?
Yeah. Yes, he is in the meeting.
उनको unmute कर दीजिए एक बार. विकास उनको unmute कर दीजिए.
I can see this question on the chat box. Though this question is not related to private trust, there's a question related to charitable trust, but I would answer that. If the trust has been created, if the trust has accumulated wealth over the years, it is possible you can register this trust, make an application for registration of the trust in form number 10A. Though if it is a religious trust, because you are saying it's a temple, so the trust is not likely to get 80G certificate. And once you get registered as a trust, then you will be able to enjoy the benefits of section 11 of the Income Tax Act. There is no issue in that. There is no issue.
Trust will be formed. There is no written deed.
So if there is no written deed, I would advise that you should form a written deed now. That should be done.
Who will make the written deed?
The persons who are now managing the affairs, they will make the written deed of declaration of trust would be made by the persons who are now managing the show.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Sir, we can see the another question from Manish Kedia ji. He's asking whether a will prepared in favor of son on a plain paper and notarized enforceable in law, where the daughter are not aware of the will.
A person who, when a person is making a will, suppose I am making a will, I need not make it public to my son and daughter. I can keep it secret also. There is no issue in that. So I can give all my wealth to son and daughters may not be aware. That is perfectly all right. And if the daughters challenge that will, then obviously the objections may be filed by them, but ultimately the court will decide whether the will was genuine or not. Once the will is held to be genuine, then the sons can inherit all the properties. There is nothing in that.
All right. Sir, the another question came in the chat box from Lalit Agarwal once again. He's asking, now that daughter is one of the co-partner, will she become the karta if she is the eldest member of the HUF.
Yes, yes. Eldest male or eldest female is eligible to become Karta of the family. Whether married or unmarried doesn't matter.
All right. So one question from Ketan Satnalika ji. He's asking, can discretionary trust having two beneficiary have minimum percentage basis like 10% each minimum and rest portion discretionary?
Yeah, some portion fixed, some portion unfixed. That is perfectly all right. It will be held to be a discretionary trust. The discretionary trust tag will not go away.
All right. Another question is how the asset acquired by the testator post making of will be distributed.
Generally, in the will, it is written that whatever I want to distribute, I will make provision that whatever assets I am holding as on date, I am writing in my will that it will be distributed in this manner. And I also write that whatever assets I may henceforth acquire, what will be the manner in which the will be distributed, the assets will be distributed. I make a provision for that. If I do not do that, in such a situation, friends, the assets for which I have written specifically, that will be distributed as per the will. And the assets for which I have not written specifically, that will be distributed as per section 8 or section 15 of the Hindu Succession Act, depending upon the person being male or female respectively.
Sir, one more question is from Pranav Biswas. He's asking, in case of will, is there a difference treatment between the inherited property and own property?
You can only make a will of the property which belongs to you. Whether it is inherited by you or whether you acquired on your own. But you can write a will जो आपका खुद का है. अब मैं चाहूं कि ताजमहल का will कर दूं मेरी wife को, I cannot do. That doesn't belong to me. I can write only a will for something which belongs to me in my individual capacity.
Sir, I think he's asking कि suppose मैं हूँ, मेरे पास में कुछ प्रॉपर्टी मेरे बाप दादा का है, वो मैंने ले लिया, कुछ मैंने कमाया है, उस दोनों के लिए कुछ अलग अलग करना होगा कि
बाप दादा से मिली हुई प्रॉपर्टी अगर आपकी खुद की हो गई है सेपरेट प्रॉपर्टी, then you can write one single will for all this. You can write number of wills also. आपके पास 10 प्रॉपर्टी है, आप 10 जन को देना चाह रहे हैं, आप 10 will भी बना सकते हैं, all dealing with different assets. There is no bar on that.
Okay. So one more question from Amit Sharma ji. He's asking, what compliances need to be done in case of a death of person or inheriting the asset lying in balance sheet of a deceased person if the will is made but not submitted with the court?
In case of a person who has died, who has made a will, in order to inherit the assets as per the will, the Indian Succession Act 1925 has to be followed, which provides for getting a probate to be done from the city civil court. However, in some cases, depending upon the quantum of the asset, the banks and the institutions are allowing the assets to be given to the nominee if nomination has been done, or up to a certain amount, they are even giving the assets, they allowing the asset to be transferred based on an indemnity bond. But in case the assets are substantial, there is no way other than getting a probate from the competent court in order to transfer the assets to the person named in the will. Till that is done, the return of that person will have to be filed as estate as per section 168 of the Income Tax Act.
I think none of the question right now left with the chat box, and if any of us is having any questions, please quickly ask the question by unmuting yourself or by raising the hand. Otherwise, we will close this session. Do you have any questions? It seems no. Now I request Vikas Bathwalji to please complete this session. It was really nice, wonderful session, and a lot of questions came, and all was replied very well with a good experience as well as provisions of the act. It was really nice. That's the last question just to be receiving. Nitai Kishore Bandyopadhyay is saying, what is the status of legal ownership certificate?
Sir, I don't get this question. Can you please ask this question? Can he be unmuted so that he can ask this question?
Nitai ji, please ask personally. Nitai da को unmute कीजिए because ये निताई जी पूछिए.
Yes, Mr. Nitai. Can you please ask your question?
नहीं ऊपर देखिए आ देना
निताई दा আপনার আওয়াজটা আসছে না, একটু আনমিউট করুন আপনাকে.
वो ये और बैक बैक
Nitai Kishore ji, are you listening us? Can you hear us?
Yes,
Please
he
put
can
your
hear.
question here.
Please unmute yourself and please ask your question, sir. Legal ownership certificate. I think there is some question about legal ownership certificate.
Okay, sir. Till he put his question, one more question came from Suresh Goenka ji. Suresh Goenka ji, are you in the hall? Zoom hall? I'm reading his question. In case of discretionary trust, can the discretion of the trustee be controlled by the settler by writing a letter of wishes to the trustee outside the trust deed? Second, will this change be the nature of trust? Third, will such letter of wishes be legally enforceable on trustees?
You see, generally the letter of wishes is prepared by a settler to give some kind of directions to the trustees regarding the manner in which the trust is to be administered. So it would be perfectly all right for the settler to give a guidance by way of a letter of wishes. And I would assume that trustees would be mandated to follow the wish of the settler. Unless it is not in the interest of the beneficiaries to follow the letter of wishes, they should follow, they have to follow the letter of wishes. Unless they can show that by following letter of wishes, they are violating any other provision of the trust deed which has been settled by the settler. I take it so.
Okay. Several more questions from Lalit Agrawal ji. He is asking, can an executor of will distribute the movable asset without going for the probate of the will?
He can distribute, but it will be at his own risk, because the title of the executor to make the distribution arises only once the court has approved. But if he is very sure, if he is dead sure that there will be no objection, then he can distribute the assets if there are no objections, then there should not be any problem in that.
Okay. Sir, I will take the last question of this session. Okay, Nitai Kishoji, is microphone not working? So he written something here in the chat box. In a previous seminar, it was informed that there is government office at Harris Mukherjee Road from where one can get legal ownership certificate. He's asking some practical question here.
Sir, I am not very sure about this legal ownership certificate, because the as far as assets which are inherited out of will, the competent court can only give this certificate. But about this legal ownership certificate, frankly, I'm not very sure about this.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bikash, please do the needful for our learner speakers.
Thank you, Vishnu Bhaiya. Thank you, Vishnu Bhaiya, for giving me a chance to offer a vote of thanks to our learned speaker, Sri Ramesh Patodia ji. I heartily thank Ramesh Patodia ji for deliberating a wonderful deliberation on estate planning. I hope that all the participants have gained lot of things from today's deliberation. Thank you, Patodia ji. Once again, I heartily thank all the participants for joining this program. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vishnu.
Thank you, Bhaiya, for coming, for giving the time.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Any
much.
day, any time, sir. Any day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.